Max had always been a hero, a golden Labrador with a sleek, muscular frame and intelligent, soulful eyes. He had been trained as a guide dog from an early age. His life had a clear purpose: to be the eyes for his visually impaired owner, Mr. Callahan, and to help him navigate the challenges of a sightless world. For 7 years, Max was Mr. Callahan's unwavering companion, guiding him safely through busy streets, crowded markets, and treacherous subway platforms. Max's dedication was absolute, his bond with Mr. Callahan unbreakable. But heroes are not immune to accidents. It happened on an otherwise ordinary morning. The pavement was wet from an overnight rain, and Max, as always, was alert to every sound and scent, ensuring Mr. Callahan's safety. They were crossing a street when the screech of tires broke through the morning quiet. A car skidded uncontrollably, the driver failing to brake in time. In a split second, Max leaped sideways, pulling Mr. Callahan to safety, but not before the car's bumper clipped Max's hind leg. The pain was immediate, sharp, and immobilizing. Max whimpered as he tried to stand, his leg refusing to bear his weight. Mr. Callahan knelt beside him, his hands trembling. "Max, no, are you okay, boy?" His voice cracked with fear and guilt. Veterinarians did everything they could, but the injury left Max with a permanent limp. He could no longer perform the precise, agile movements required of a guide dog. Mr. Callahan, heartbroken, had no choice but to retire Max. He knew he couldn't give Max the active life he deserved, and with great reluctance, he brought him to a shelter that specialized in rehoming service animals. The shelter was a far cry from the structured and purposeful life Max had known. Gone were the routines, the daily walks, and the quiet evenings at Mr. Callahan's feet. Now, Max spent his days in a small kennel, surrounded by the chaotic noise of barking dogs and the hurried footsteps of staff. Max didn't understand why his world had changed so drastically. He lay on the cold floor, his golden coat dulled and his legs stiff from disuse. He missed Mr. Callahan's voice, the reassuring hand on his head, and the familiar routes they used to walk together. At first, Max greeted every visitor with hope. He sat up straight, wagging his tail despite the ache in his leg, his eyes pleading for a connection. But time after time, people passed him by, their attention drawn to younger, more energetic dogs. "Poor guy," a shelter worker murmured one day as she refilled his water bowl. "You're such a good boy, Max. They just don't see it." Before we continue the story, do you think anyone would want to adopt Max, knowing that he is an old and injured dog? Please comment and come back to the story. Families came and went, their laughter echoing through the shelter as they met playful puppies and agile retrievers. Max watched them, his tail wagging weakly, his limp making him stand out, but not in the way he hoped. "I think he's too old," one woman whispered to her partner. "Did you see his leg?" "Poor thing probably needs too much care," said another. Max's heart seemed to sink deeper each time someone walked away. The once vibrant dog began retreating into himself, spending more time lying down, his head resting on his paws. The shelter staff tried to encourage him, bringing treats and extra blankets, but even they worried. "He's losing hope," one of the workers said. "If only people could see beyond the limp." Weeks turned into months, and Max's kennel became just another part of the shelter. Leo Delacroix had once been a name synonymous with vibrancy, passion, and artistry. His canvases, filled with swirling colors and evocative emotions, had graced galleries from New York to Paris. But the world that had once celebrated his genius now felt like a distant memory, buried beneath layers of grief and self-doubt. The turning point came a year ago when tragedy struck. Leo lost his partner, Daniel, in a sudden accident. Daniel had been Leo's biggest supporter, the person who believed in him when he doubted himself and pushed him to take risks with his art. Without him, the world felt colorless, and the studio that had once been a sanctuary became a prison. Days bled into nights, and nights into weeks. Leo stopped painting, the brushes on his work table collecting dust. The canvases leaned against the walls, blank and accusing. He couldn't bring himself to touch the paints. They felt foreign, almost mocking. Instead, Leo spent his days in silence, staring out the window of his small apartment. The city outside was alive with energy. Street performers, bustling cafes, vibrant murals. But Leo felt none of it. The hum of life felt like static, and the emptiness inside him seemed to grow louder with each passing day. But one rainy afternoon, the bell over the shelter's door jingled, signaling the arrival of a new visitor. It was Leo, a man who carried a quiet sadness in his eyes and a hesitant step in his stride. Leo hadn't intended to visit the shelter that day. Pushed by his sister, he had reluctantly agreed to look for a companion. She believed a dog might help him break free from the heavy depression that had overtaken his life after the death of his partner. Leo wandered the rows of kennels, barely engaging with the dogs, barking and jumping to get his attention. Then he reached Max's kennel. Max didn't bark. He didn't jump. He simply lifted his head and wagged his tail, his golden eyes meeting Leo's with a calm intensity. Slowly, Max rose to his feet, his limp visible, but his gaze steady and full of warmth. Leo crouched down, pressing his hand against the kennel door. "What's his story?" he asked a nearby staff member. The worker smiled gently. "That's Max. He used to be a guide dog, got injured in an accident and had to retire. He's been here a while. He's older and most people don't want a dog with a limp." Leo looked at Max, who had pressed his nose against the door, his tail thumping softly. "I know what it's like to feel overlooked," Leo murmured. He stood, his voice firm. "I'll take him." Leo wasn't sure what he had expected when he brought Max home, but their first few days together were marked by cautious adjustment. Max explored the apartment at his own pace, sniffing every corner, his limp noticeable, but not slowing him down much. He quickly found a spot by the window where he would lie down and watch the world outside. Leo, still grappling with his depression, felt an odd sense of relief in Max's quiet presence. The dog didn't demand attention the way some pets did. Instead, he simply existed alongside Leo, as if understanding that they both needed time. Mornings became their first shared ritual. Leo, who had struggled to get out of bed for months, now woke up early to take Max for a walk. The Labrador didn't move with the same agility as younger dogs, but his enthusiasm was contagious. Even with his limp, Max wagged his tail as they strolled through the neighborhood, sniffing every bush and mailbox. For Leo, these walks became small moments of clarity. The fresh air, the rhythmic pace of Max's steps, and the occasional greetings from neighbors brought a semblance of structure to his otherwise chaotic thoughts. One morning, as Max stopped to inspect a patch of grass, Leo caught himself smiling. A rare and unfamiliar feeling. Max seemed to have a knack for knowing when Leo was struggling. On particularly difficult days, when the weight of grief made it hard for Leo to move, Max would nudge his hand with his nose or rest his head on Leo's lap. One rainy afternoon, Max limped over to the corner of the apartment where Leo's art supplies had been gathering dust. He sniffed at a canvas leaning against the wall, then turned to look at Leo, his tail wagging slowly. "You want me to paint?" Leo asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Max barked softly, his golden eyes unwavering. With a sigh, Leo retrieved the canvas and set it on his easel. His hands trembled as he picked up a brush, the familiar weight, both comforting and intimidating. He dipped it into a vibrant yellow paint, hesitated, and then began to work. As weeks turned into months, Max became both muse and motivator. Together they explored the world, walks in the park, afternoons by the river. Max's limp never stopped him from enjoying life, and Max's resilience inspired Leo to keep painting. Leo's work took on a new dimension. His canvases were filled with vibrant colors and dynamic forms, each one capturing Max's spirit. The paintings told stories of strength, healing, and the unbreakable bond between man and dog. Encouraged by his sister, Leo submitted his new collection to a local gallery. Titled Brush Strokes of Resilience, the exhibit featured portraits of Max alongside abstract pieces inspired by their journey together. The opening night drew a crowd, including art critics, animal lovers, and local advocates for service animals. Each painting was accompanied by a short story about Max's life, shedding light on the vital role service dogs play and the challenges they face after retirement. The centerpiece was a large, vibrant painting of Max standing proud, his limp almost unnoticeable against a radiant backdrop. Beneath it was a plaque that read, "For Max, who taught me that resilience isn't about perfection, but about finding beauty in the broken pieces." The exhibit was a resounding success. Proceeds from the event were donated to organizations supporting retired service animals. Leo also began working with shelters, using his art to advocate for overlooked dogs like Max. Max, ever humble, greeted visitors at the gallery, wagging his tail as children and adults alike came to meet the dog who had inspired so much. Months later, Leo stood in his studio, now bathed in sunlight, with Max at his side. His work was thriving, but more importantly, so was he. Max, once a dog without a purpose, had found a new calling, not as a guide, but as a companion, healer, and a muse. Together they had rebuilt their lives, proving that second chances could create something extraordinary. In the years that followed, Leo's work continued to raise awareness about the plight of service animals and the power of human-animal connections. Max's story touched countless lives, reminding people that every being, no matter their scars, has value. After watching this story, do you think it's a great thing to help people and animals? There are many more true stories on the channel for you to enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to let us know you still love animals and their stories.